Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today I'm taking your questions on catalytic converters, parasitic current draws, water leaks, and more. This is episode 92 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. So I'll be taking your questions today that you have sent in to Charles at HumbleMechanic.com and put question for Charles in the subject. Also, the best way to get me to answer your question is to ask the question, hit the enter button a couple of times, and then give me more details. That'll help me read through the emails faster and get more questions on a show like this. So before we get into your questions, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP Automotive deals in a bunch of OE parts. Not only do they supply Volkswagen and Audi with the DSG fluid, they also deal in things like timing belt kits and suspension parts and coolant. If you've done a timing belt on a European car, you've probably seen Catalytic belts. They're actually a division of CRP Automotive, so check them out at crpautomotive.com. All right, let's get into the questions. First one comes from Kelly. I bought a used 2003 Volkswagen Jetta with a 2.0 engine and a 5-speed manual transmission. It has 143,000 miles on it. The check engine light is on and the code reads P0420. I changed the catalytic converter, did not use a genuine VW part, drove approximately 200 miles and the check engine light came back on with the same code. After the fact, I found the cat was changed 2 other times since hitting 100K, neither time using a VW cat. Also, both oxygen sensors had been replaced around 100,000 miles. Can the part not being genuine VW cause the problem? Kelly, awesome question. Something I've ran into a bunch. Absolutely. The part not being a Volkswagen part can cause the problem. You mentioned that both oxygen sensors were replaced. This could be the cause of the problem. That generation of engine was very particular, as most Volkswagens are, about the sensors installed. They never really liked non-OEM oxygen sensors. So that could be a cause of the problem. The other problem that I see with catalytic converters that aren't factory is generally they're not the right size. So on the 2 liter, the cat's like this big. And a lot of times what we see is really small catalytic converters installed in the cars. And it's usually cut and welded in. And it may last for a little bit of time and it may be okay, but more often than not when I see an aftermarket catalytic converter, the vehicle generally has that P0420 code for catalyst efficiency below threshold. But before I put a factory catalytic converter in that car, which is very expensive, I would have it inspected. I would have someone put it up in the air and really take a look at the installation job. Because in addition to these cats being smaller, a lot of times they're, again, welded in and they may not be welded properly. There may be a small leak either at the front or the back of the cat, and that can cause that P0420 code. Being that this is the 3rd catalytic converter in 140,000 miles, I'm guessing that it's probably not a workmanship issue. We're probably using the wrong catalytic converter. We may have had the wrong catalytic converter installed, or one that's not really meant for the car, or one that's just not efficient enough for the vehicle. I would have someone check it out, make sure the workmanship is good. If the workmanship is good, it may be time to put a factory cat as well as factory oxygen sensors back in the car. So Kelly, good luck. I'm sorry for that news. I know that's going to be an expensive repair, but that may be the only way to get this P0420 code taken care of. Now there are ways to cheat the P0420 code by installing a rear oxygen sensor spacer, and that will pull the oxygen sensor a little bit out of the airstream of the exhaust and make the ECM think that it's working properly. Now, if your state has emissions inspections, you can't really do that. That'll fail an emissions inspection in most states. If your state doesn't have any kind of inspection, you can look into that. But we also want to make sure our car's running properly. So, that's going to be one you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons on. Awesome question, Kelly, and good luck to you. All right, next question comes from Robert. He says, I have a 2007 GTI with a 300 to 500 milliamp parasitic draw. What a parasitic draw is when you turn the ignition off, after a certain amount of time, all the modules in the car are supposed to go to sleep. If you have a module staying on, or let's say you leave the lights on, that's going to slowly drain the battery, and that's called a parasitic current draw. I'm trying to narrow down the source of the problem by watching the amp draw on a multimeter while pulling fuses. I started by checking all the fuses under the hood, and those circuits seem fine. However, when I went to check the fuses in the driver's door panel, I realized that I didn't know how to trick the door latch into thinking the door is closed. First question, am I going about this the right way? And if so, how do I trick the door latch into thinking it's closed? Any other advice to help me nail down this draw would be greatly appreciated. Okay, Robert, you are dealing in a 2007 world, so we have to think a little bit differently about diagnosing parasitic current draws. It used to be you'd hook up an amp clamp, you start pulling fuses out till the draw went away. Unfortunately, we can't really do that anymore. Modules are powered off other modules. They have things called virtual power. So if you pull one fuse, you may be taking a whole circuit down that powers 5 or 6 modules. You're narrowing it down a little bit, but not as much as we really need to. We need to find the exact cause of the problem. So here's what I do when I set up a current draw. I open the doors, I open the trunk, and I open the hood. Then I go in with a screwdriver and I'll latch the door with the door open. Basically, you're just taking a screwdriver in the door latch and closing it. And you want to do that for all the doors as well as the trunk and the hood. The hood's a little bit trickier, so you might need a bigger than a pocket screwdriver to do that with. Just open all the doors and latch everything. Go ahead and lock the car. Wait about 30 to 40 minutes for all the modules to go to sleep. Then we can start checking things. Like I said, you don't want to check the current draw by pulling fuses out. The right way to diagnose a current draw on a new generation vehicle is actually a voltage drop in millivolts across a fuse. So you're going to take your multimeter, you're going to set it to millivolts, and then you're going to put your contacts on each side of the fuse. And what you'll see is you'll see a little bit of voltage, and then it should drop down to 0. If it doesn't drop down to 0, that's the fuse circuit that you have the current draw on. There's a chart, and I'm going to try and find it and put a link in the video notes for you guys, where you can go in, you can read the amperage of the fuse, whether it's a small fuse or a big fuse, and see what is an acceptable amount of volt drop on that fuse. Once you find your fuse with the really high volt drop, now you know the circuit you're dealing with. You're going to really need to get the wiring diagram and see what is on that fuse, and then basically narrow down your issue from there. Now that we know the circuit, maybe we can start unplugging modules. But you can't just start pulling fuses. It doesn't eliminate enough like it used to. You know, that may be something I should do a video on, because I really like diagnosing parasitic current draws, which is kind of weird. I think it's a fun thing, and setting it up is cool, and it's interesting to me on how that happens. So good luck in your current draw. Again, I'll try and find that chart and put a link in the show notes, video notes for you guys to check out. And Robert, man, good luck to you. And when you find out what the component was that was causing the draw, let me know. A couple of quick checks though, man. Check your cigarette lighters, check your 12-volt outlets. Check your radio, make sure your radio's not staying on, make sure you're not having any lights left on. If you have VAGCOM or anything, I recommend always checking faults to see if you maybe have a fault for a door latch or something like that. That can kind of point you in the right direction. As well as if you have VAGCOM, you can go in and look at your alarm triggers, and if your alarm is triggered a bunch of times by the same component, that may be a really good place to start as well. All right, next one comes from Sean. He says, is VW going to expand the e-Golf beyond a handful of states that they're currently in? And is Florida going to be one of them? Sean, I assume, this is just my guess, my assumption, that Volkswagen will expand the electric car market. They really have no reason not to. You know, electric cars aren't going away. They're not going to reduce the amount of electric cars that are out there. Look at the performance of Tesla. Look at the buzz around Tesla. I don't know that Tesla necessarily is going to be the company that brings, you know, the affordable, cool electric car to the masses, but I bet you someone is going to use Tesla's technology to do that. I've personally only been in an e-Golf once at the Chicago Auto Show last year in 2014. Very cool car, a very capable vehicle. It's a Golf, so that's awesome too. I foresee our electric car market starting to expand. It may take some time. I've seen a PDI form for the Jetta Hybrid for 15 and 16. Allegedly, that's going to happen. I don't know. You know, for me, with really any car, I believe it's going to come out when I see one in the showroom floor, especially with Volkswagen. I believe it's going to happen when we get one at the dealership and it's getting PDI'd. So before that, I don't really buy into the, you know, we're going to bring this vehicle to the States or whatever. I've heard we're going to do a ton of stuff in my career with a Volkswagen, and a lot of it happened and a lot of it didn't. So I don't try and buy in too much until we have one on the showroom floor. So yeah, I expect you'll see more in the lines of the e-Golf and maybe a Jetta. You know, I'm assuming Audi's probably going to bring something over to get into that luxury plug-in electric vehicle market as well. So if I hear anything, I will make sure I let you guys know. All right, next one comes from John. He says, question about what seems to be an epidemic of the panoramic sunroof leaks. For our 2013 SportWagen, the roof was leaking from the front and rear drains at about 20,000 miles. They said it was debris. I'm in South Carolina, so there were some water oak leaves in there, but that never made sense to me about the rear pano drains leaking. No way to have leaves debris in there. Each drain has its own tube and location. Smell came back 2 to 3 months later. Now it's damp in the headliner again. Yeah, John, we see water leaks on the panoramic sunroofs. We see water leaks on most sunroofs, and I would say 80% of the time it is debris. It's not necessarily a leaf in there. It can be dirt. You're in South Carolina. It could easily be a combination of dirt and water and pollen that gets in those drains and clogs them up just a little bit, enough to back the water up and then leak out of the drain. So remember that these sunroofs, and the EOS is an even better example, they're not meant to stop water, they're meant to move water. They're meant to channel water, you know, down the track of the sunroof and then either out the front or out the back, depending on, you know, which way your vehicle's sitting. Cleaning the sunroof drains is very, very important on vehicles with sunroofs. I think actually my Passat probably has a small water leak from the left rear sunroof drain as well. The way you can test it is open the sunroof, take a bottle of water and pour a little down in the track of the sunroof, and you should see it come out right behind the front tires or out in the back, depending on which way your vehicle's parked. You know, maybe I would face it nose down and test the fronts, turn the car around, face the nose up and test the backs and make sure that you don't have any leaks. But a lot of time it's not leaves, it's an accumulation of dirt and debris that gets in it and clogs the drains. Generally we use a little butyl or something like that to seal up where the rubber drain connects into the sunroof track. That helps a lot. That works really well to prevent the water from draining back into the car. But again, if the drains are clogged, that water's gonna go somewhere. Now you can take a little bit of compressed air and just shoot out the drains and remove any debris. Volkswagen made this special tool that was like a snake that we were running down in and cleaning drains out. That worked pretty well till you knocked the end of the drain off and then the drain drained into the car instead of out of the car. I'm not 100% sure, but I think cleaning the drains may actually be in the owner's book of some vehicles at, I want to say, the 20 or 40,000 mile mark. So double check in your owner's book, John, and see if it's in there. It's a good habit to be in. It's something that, you know, cleaning them out, make sure there's no dirt, no debris in there is really going to be the #1 thing to prevent sunroof leaks in your panoramic sunroof car, as well as most cars that have that type of setup. So great question, John. I hate that you had to ask it, but hopefully that'll help you and help some other folks as well. All right, next one comes from Don, and I actually wasn't 100% sure on the answer to this question, so I reached out to somebody that's probably put more fuel in vehicles than every person I know put together. So this one comes from Don. It's actually 2 questions. When is the best time of day to buy gas? And should you let your tank get below 1/4 of a tank? I'm sure there are questions on diesel as well. I reached out to my good friend Wayne from CleanMPG.com. He is a Guinness World Record holder for hypermiling and an awesome dude. He just recently finished up a 48-state drive of the Golf on like 110 gallons of fuel. I forget exactly what it was. Sorry, Wayne. I'll put a link in the show notes for you guys to read the whole article. So when it comes to putting fuel in vehicles, I don't know if there's anybody better equipped than Wayne to answer this question. All right, so here's Wayne's response. Charles, tanks are underground and usually around 55 to 60 degrees, and temperatures change little throughout a 24-hour period. Density differences will not make a difference. Canadian pumps are density compensated, but that really doesn't matter. So based on that, it sounds like there's really not a better time to fill up your tank. And regarding the 1/4 tank of fuel question, I've been driving to less than 1/8 of a tank for the last 1,000,000 miles without any incident, but that's just me. So there you have it. Now, I will say I don't run my tank that low. I usually try and fill up at just over 1/4 of a tank. That is for a couple of reasons. One, I'm very paranoid about running out of fuel. I have a 20-mile commute to and from work. There's probably 8 gas stations on the way, so the odds of me running out of fuel from work to home is very low. The other side of that is you never know what's going to happen. There could be a 20-car pileup on the highway and I could be in traffic for 6 hours. Granted, I could shut the car off, but you never know. So I don't like to do it. As far as damage or anything like that, Wayne has put more miles on cars than I will ever imagine to put on cars. So I trust his opinion. I have seen fuel pumps damaged by running completely out of fuel, but that's not really the same. That's not running it down to 1/8 of a tank. So yeah, Don, awesome questions, man. And Wayne's responses were really good. I'll be sure to put links to cleanmpg.com as well as that 48-state drive that Wayne did in the Golf. And Wayne, man, thanks for taking time out of your day to answer that question for me. I really appreciate it. All right, I pulled 2 quick ones off of YouTube. What's the correct way to top off coolant? Engine hot or engine cold? I don't think it really matters. I like to top it off when I need to top it off. When the level's low, I put coolant in it. I will say if you're topping it off on a hot engine, you have to be very careful. Take the cap off slowly. If it's a traditional radiator style, let the car cool off for a while before you take the radiator cap off. If it's a Volkswagen style, you can spin the cap off, just do it slow and watch for the coolant to bubble out. Remember, these systems are under pressure. I'm sure the correct answer is you should always top it off when it's cold, but if it's warm and you need to top your coolant off, I'd rather you top it off, a little wrong and have coolant in there than not top it off and run your cooling system way down. Top it off when it needs it. If it's hot, be very careful taking the cap off. And the last question of the day comes from Butterfingers. If you're bringing a vehicle in for recall, recalls and it has an ECM tune, will you be flagged TD1? TD1 is the flag from Volkswagen saying your vehicle has been modified. This really depends on the recall. If this is a recall that requires a software update, whether it's an ECM or another module, it may, and you can always refuse these recalls. If it's a recall on, say, the water pump like the GTI service action, then it shouldn't impact that in any way, shape, or form. There's no reason to run faults and check for anything in that space. So like all TD1 type things, it's very situational. It really depends. But for the most part, you should be absolutely 100% fine. If you're not sure, especially on a software update, hold off on doing the update and give Volkswagen a call for further guidance. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Awesome group of questions. And thanks again, Wayne, for taking time to help answer that question of Don's. Hey, if you liked the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and obviously here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Oh, beer of the day. Beer of the day is a beer that I've had as beer of the day before. This is Hop Roar from Carolina Brewing Company. This was actually bottled 3 days ago, so it doesn't get too much fresher than that.